Hello and welcome to the channel. This is hopefully the first of many shorter edited tutorials I'll be making. Normally I stream on Twitch several days a week, so if you're interested in the full process, feel free to catch me there. So, as many of you will be aware now, I used to work as part of Games Workshop's official painting team, Eavy Metal, where I painted for the box art full time. One of these projects was the new Castellan Crowe from the Hexfire box set, released just last weekend. I've received a few requests lately on how I painted the studio's version, so I thought I'd put together a shortish video on how to achieve a similar result with currently available products. Now, it's worth mentioning that this is not the only way to achieve these results. There's many different paints that I tested during the making of the video. Most of these performed very well. I will mention these as alternatives throughout the video, so feel free to try these as they might be more to your liking, or they might just be products that you also currently own. There really is quite a range of finishes and blue tones that will work well with Grey Knights in particular, and this video is more of a general demonstration on how to get the finish and shading down and the highlighting stages. The actual armour here was achieved in around 5 or so hours of painting and condensed down into this shorter format. So something to bear in mind if you are tackling a larger project for an army. So without further ado, let's get into this tutorial. So I start off here by using Vallejo acrylic metal color. This is an airbrush formula, so it goes really nicely through an airbrush, gives a very smooth, consistent finish. So it's already pre-thinned, there's no need to thin it. So here I am just putting down the initial base coats with the airbrush. And it really is worth spending a bit of extra time on the cleanup prior to this, as the metallics will show up any imperfections on the surface. This time I opted to use Citadel Chaos Black Spray as the primer. I'm always very careful when I use any spray primer and make sure to warm up the can before use. So I tested a few alternatives here as well prior to using Vallejo metal color, and out of those I think I preferred the AK 3rd Gen gunmetal. Of course you could use Leadbelcher or Leadbelcher Air if you have an airbrush, but either is fine. If you prefer an even brighter finish to the armor here, you could potentially start off with something like Ironbreaker, as long as you leave yourself enough room for a brighter silver highlight. So as you can see now, we've got a nice solid base coat of the dark aluminium, and this is going to make the shading a lot easier later on. So for that shading we are going to use Liquitex Prussian blue. This is very similar to the old Games Workshop inks. And for the first few stages here, we're going to mix it in with the actual dark aluminium metallic. You can use inks in this way to tint metallics that you can't really do with washes. So this is one reason why I tend to prefer using inks for metallics over washes, but it all really depends on the finish that you want. So now we're just applying that mix into the recesses of the armor and towards the bottom of the armor panels. We started off with a very small amount of ink mixed into the metallic, but then I started to increase that and then applied that shading more towards the bottom of the panels. So we started to build up more of that blue tone. This was probably the longest part of the entire process, was to get this shading smooth. But just having the ink really helped with that. If you were trying to do this with a wash, it would be a little bit more difficult. On the subject of inks and washes that I tried for the shading of this Something else that came out quite well was Scale 75's Inktense Blue. That was a very nice tone of blue, and I think that would have been a close second for this. Next in line was Pro Acryl's Transparent Blue. And then finally I also used some of Games Workshop Contrast Paints, Talassar Blue. So if you have those, they're also good alternatives. So we've continued glazing this now with the ink, and you can see we're starting to build up a nice blue tone. And this is pretty much down to your own personal taste, really. If you want a less blue finish to it, then just reduce the amount of glazing that you do here. But I quite like the blue tone. I think it contrasts well next to the other metallics that are going to be on this. So as you can see here, we've finished the first soft shade with the blue ink, and now we're just starting to add in some black Templar contrast paint. So first of all, I mix this in with the blue ink, and this is our deep shade. So we're putting this into all of the recesses and panel lines, just in a very controlled way compared to the first soft shade that we did. So you could really use any black wash here. You could even use black paint. The reason why I was using black Templar is it has a slightly blue hue to it, so it kind of lends itself to this situation. You may have also noticed that I blacked out the ribbing. I think this just helps to keep things neat. Just in terms of the timing here, it took me a couple of hours to get most of the armor shaded up to this point. It does take a while, you have to be a little bit patient, especially if you want that smooth finish. So here we have most of the shading stages finished. I'm just starting to edge highlight this leg panel. For this I'm going to use Vallejo Model Air Silver. This is an airbrush paint, so it's very nicely thinned already and has quite a smooth finish. I would really recommend this paint for anyone who struggles with edge highlighting metallics. So where I can here, I'm starting to apply the highlights with the side of the tip of the brush. This is really useful in areas where the angles are sharp enough that it will pick up the highlight from the brush. Some other areas, like the top of the knee here, you just have to be very careful and use the tip of the brush. Now some time has moved on and you can see I have highlighted around most of the panels. Everything's really starting to come together at this point. Once we've got all of these highlights established, we can really start to go around and just neaten up, tidy up any areas and any highlights that we've missed. So something else that I started to do here, which I really could have spent a little bit more time doing, was blending up a little bit of a mid-tone between the base coat and the highlight. So just mixing the Vallejo Model Air into the dark aluminium and glazing it around some of these areas that would catch the light. So as you can see, we're pretty much finished now. I took a little bit of time here just to go around some of the shading and push it a little bit more. A lot of this is just down to personal taste, really, how far you want to push that blue shading. Finally, I got to a point where I was happy with it. In total, it was around 5 to 6 hours to get the armor like this. In the studio, I'd expect to spend around 2 to 2.5 days on a Primaris, so I felt this is pretty good. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Hopefully it's of some use, and I look forward to making more content on the channel in the future. Hopefully it will improve in terms of quality as well.